Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first inaugural episode of the Learning with Drones podcast with me, Heather Monthie. I'm an educator, technologist, pilot, and STEM education advocate, and I am rebranding, refocusing this podcast, and we're going to be using the same feed, but we're going to be focusing on learning with drones. So this is going to be things like drone programming, drones in cybersecurity, drone business, drones in education, all the stuff that comes with drones and the evolution that is happening in this world right now. So welcome to the first episode of the Learning with Drones podcast. So after the last 2 years or so that I have been podcasting, YouTubing, really focusing on blogging a lot over the last 3 years, I've learned a lot about internet marketing, SEO, and all those different kinds of things that goes into putting stuff out on the internet and having people find it. And so I'm going to share with you in a little bit about where we're going to go with this podcast in this episode. But because of what I have learned, I have figured out that we are really going to focus and hone in on drones, learning with drones, drones in education, and all that kind of stuff. So, but first, before we get into that, let's hear from another podcast in the Education Podcast Network.
Hi, I'm Batsheva Frankel from Overthrowing Education, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
So those of you who have been around for a little while may have noticed that I haven't really been around on the podcast much recently. And that is because I was actually taking a course in my local community. I was learning a little bit about marketing and internet marketing and, the digital space, that kind of stuff. I'm a technologist, but it's been a sort of a new world for me. But this class has really helped me to figure out what it is that you guys who are listening here are really enjoying hearing about. And so I just kind of took a step back and needed to refocus on what it is that I wanted to put out into the world and what it is that I am seeing that through the analytics that you guys are enjoying hearing about. So over the past 2 years and maybe even 3 years, just because I have been blogging for a couple of years, there have really been 2 topics that have really stood out as your favorite topics that I put out there into the interwebs. And the first is sort of the professional development side of having a successful career in STEM. So this is going to be all the different professional skills that are required, professional development, soft skills, all that kind of stuff. And a few months ago, I really had thought that this was the way I was going to go with the podcast. It's a topic that I enjoy talking about. It seems to be very popular with you. And some of you who've been listening here for a little while may remember me talking about how this was the direction I was going to go with the podcast. And I had actually put out a couple of episodes where that was really going to be the focus of the podcast. And then the other topic that has been very popular on my blog and on my YouTube channel is drones. So now this is not something I have talked a lot about on the podcast, but it has been very wildly popular on my blog and my YouTube channel, specifically discussing drones in education. And by the way, I do have the full version of each episode of this podcast on my YouTube channel. I have just the audio there with the picture, but I do this because there are some people who may be interested in learning what we're talking about here on the podcast, but they need the closed captions. So what you can do is if you know someone who may really like this podcast but needs the closed captions, you can send them over to my YouTube channel, which is linked in the show notes. Send them over to my YouTube channel. All they have to do is turn on the closed captions, and then they can read the closed captions, and so they can enjoy this podcast with us. So that second topic has really been on drones in STEM education. I have a Facebook group that is small but growing, and it's called Educators Who Drone. You can find that on Facebook, and it's slowly becoming a pretty popular topic in sort of my web sphere, I guess. But I haven't really talked a lot about it on the podcast. But when I look at all the different analytics across everything, so my blog, my podcast, my YouTube channel, Pinterest, Google Analytics, all this stuff, this was the topic that was searched for the most and the most viewed. So this means things like drone programming, drones and cybersecurity, drones and education, the business of drones, which I haven't really talked a ton about, but there is a whole business around it. And then an area that, I am personally interested in starting to learn more about is, the drone technology and the technology side of things and how drones are built and, the programming of them, the cybersecurity as well. We'll also be talking about things like aerial photography, careers, that kind of stuff. So I can still share messages with you about the professional side of being successful with a career in STEM, but we're going to just talk about it more specifically to the careers in drone, unmanned flight, autonomous flight, all that fun stuff that's really just this emerging technology. One thing that I was really excited about years ago was that I couldn't wait until there was a drone available that was under $100 that also had a software development kit with it. And for up until 2016, 17, that did not exist. The technology was still too expensive. And so I was really excited about that because I could see the possibilities for using drones in education to teach all the different areas of STEM. So science, technology, engineering, and math. You can teach so much with drones. You can learn so much with drones. And I was just really excited to see that happen. And so, but also what has happened is because drone technology has become much more affordable, there are a lot more drones in the sky in the National Airspace System. And in the coming years, it is anticipated that there will be many more drones in the sky. So the FAA is having some conversations right now about how to handle the influx of drones in the National Airspace System, in the US anyways. I do know that ICAO is having the same conversations, worldwide. So if you're in Australia or if you're in the UK and you have a different airspace system, or even Canada, you have a different airspace system, it's still governed by ICAO, which they're really helping all the different aviation authorities come up with ways to integrate drones into your national airspace system. And so what that also means is how can drones be used in education? So if you're using drones inside your building, the FAA doesn't govern that airspace, or whatever aviation authority is governing your airspace. They don't govern the insides of your building, but there's a lot of fun activities that you can do with drones outside. And so we want to make sure that we are still able to use drones in education, but use them legally and use them safely. There will be some changes coming. It's 2020 right now. So if you're listening to this in the future, there's going to be changes coming. That's just the way it is. Technology is becoming cheaper. It's becoming much more affordable. Technology is advancing, and we're due for a overhaul of our airspace system. So I have decided to rename this podcast the Learning with Drones podcast. I will still be sharing research-based topics around using drones in the classroom, drone programming, cybersecurity, and business. We're just going to focus down the topic of the podcast a bit more narrowly to help you learn more about drones in education, technology, and business. So before we were a little bit kind of more broader, and we talked a lot about, technology and education, and it really could have been anywhere from pre-K to, 20 or, there wasn't really a focus. It was just really focused on technology in education. Now we're going to take that topic and just focus it down, niche it down a little bit more. So I already have done a literature search just on drones in education, and I have found that there's so much stuff that I get to share with you. I'm very excited about that. I've got some downloads already going. So I'm very excited about this refocus, and I hope that you will come along with me. So for the second part of this episode, I want to share with you the audio from a YouTube video that I just did. And what I did was I put together a list of a couple of different free resources that the FAA gives you to help prepare you for the FAA Part 107 written exam. So in the US, if you want to act as a sort of a commercial remote pilot or commercial unmanned pilot, you need to pass this Part 107 written exam. I took it. I do have my commercial pilot certificate, and I'm a certificated flight instructor. I don't have a current flight review right now. I did take a step back from flying to focus on my career for the last couple of years. And so it's a planned hiatus. I will be starting up flying again in 2021. I'm very excited about that. But since I don't have a current flight review, I needed to go take this exam, which was okay because I want to help other people take this exam. So it was good for me to go take it. But I scored a 95 on it. Full disclaimer, I've been involved in aviation my whole life, been a pilot since 97. But there was a lot of questions about airspace and understanding the rules and the regulations, because when we're getting drones into the national airspace system of manned aircraft, the unmanned operators need to really have a full, solid understanding of that. So what I did was I made a YouTube video explaining all the different free resources that are available for you to study, to take, and hopefully pass that exam. So I pulled the audio from that video for you to listen to here. Now, the Part 107 exam is pertinent to those of us in the U.S. only. I know that there are some of you who are listening in other countries, and welcome. You are very welcome here. But even if you're in another country, these are really great resources for you to learn more about aviation and drones. Some of the rules and regulations are going to be different. But when you're talking about things like weather phenomenon and loading and performance and that kind of stuff, that's all the same regardless. So you can watch the YouTube video. I will link to that in the show notes. But I've also ripped the audio out of the video for you to listen to here. So let's get to it. Hi everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am Heather Monthie, and in today's video, I'm going to share with you some resources to help you study for the FAA Part 107 written exam. So the FAA provides a lot of different resources that you can use to help prepare you to take this exam. And what I did is I put together a blog post on my website. The link is in the description box below, where I link to all these different free resources for you. So you can either, some of these resources you can either download as a PDF, and or you can purchase them for print off Amazon or another publisher, which I do that for a couple of different publications just because I'm the kind of person I like to write and scribble and tab and all that kind of stuff. So let's go through the resources now. So the first one is the Airman Certification Standards. So the FAA publishes what's called the ACS, or the Airman Certification Standards, and that is for every pilot certificate that's out there. There's certain certification standards that you need to meet in order to exercise the privileges of that certificate. Okay, so essentially what it is it's telling you everything you need to know to pass the test. So if you download that, you can sort of use that as your checklist for the things that you need to study for the FAA Part 107 written exam. It's a really great way to just keep yourself on track and make sure that you have covered all the different things that you need to study before you sit down and take the exam. The next thing is the Part 107 Small Unmanned Aircraft Systems initial course that the FAA offers through its FAAsafety.gov website. So the FAA has a website where there's a lot of different online tutorials, webinars, workshops, and it's also a place where you can go and register for in-person workshops. And so you can go there and you can sign up for that course. It is called Part 107 Small Unmanned Aircraft Systems Initial. And that course is actually designed for existing Part 61 pilot certificate holders. So somebody who is already a private pilot or a commercial pilot, airline transport pilot, recreational pilot, sport pilot could take that course, and as long as he or she has a current flight review, wouldn't necessarily need to take the exam. So even if you don't have a Part 61 pilot certificate, this is a great place to get started with learning all the different things that you need to know to sit down and take the FAA Part 107 written exam. Now this course probably isn't going to prepare you for everything if you're not already a Part 61 pilot or don't have any aviation background. But that's why they give you a lot of other resources to help you study. The next thing is the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. Now, I get this book in print, and here it is right here. And it's thick. There's a lot of different images in here. There's a lot of different knowledge in here. There's a ton of stuff in here, okay? So this book is really sort of the main go-to source for any pilot of any certificate type. And, I started flying airplanes in 1997, and that was one of the very first books that I got. And the FAA does update it, on a regular basis. You can download the individual chapters as PDFs. But like I said, because there's a lot of different images in there, those files can get really big. So you have to download each individual chapter. And you don't necessarily need to read the whole book to prepare for the FAA Part 107 written exam. It's an interesting book. There's a lot of stuff to learn. I recommend sitting down and reading it. But in order to prepare for the Part 107 exam, you should definitely read and have a solid understanding of chapters 2, 11, and 14. And that will give you a good understanding of aeronautical decision making, or ADM, weather, and airport operations. So like I said, you can download individual PDFs. I've also put a link in the blog post and in the description box below where you can purchase the most current version of the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge off of Amazon. I do suggest that you make sure that you have the most current version of the book. Like I said, the FAA does update that every so often, so just make sure that when you're purchasing it off of Amazon that you're getting the most current updated version. The next thing that you need to know is 14 CFR Part 107. So 14 CFR Part 107 is the Code of Federal Regulations that, acting as a small unmanned aircraft operator, as a commercial operator under Part 107, those are the laws that you need to follow when you're exercising the privileges of that certificate. So you can get a huge book, and I don't even have a current one because I don't buy it anymore because it's available online, but it's called the FAR-AIM. And so this book is published every year, and the FARs are the Federal Aviation Regulations, and then the AIM is the Aeronautical Information Manual. And so the FARs cover all the different things in all the different areas of aviation. CFR Part 107 is what you need to know in order to act as a commercial remote pilot, essentially. So you want to make sure to read those regulations and understand them like the back of your hand, because that's what the test is going to be on. The next thing that you can study for the Part 107 written exam is Advisory Circular 107-2. And so what an advisory circular is a supplemental document that the FAA provides pilots, anybody involved in aviation, sort of supplemental information that don't necessarily fall under the FARs. They doesn't necessarily need to be in the AIM, but they're supplemental knowledge for you. So Advisory Circular 107-2 helps you understand small unmanned operations within the National Airspace System. So it's critical for you to understand the National Airspace System in order to pass this exam and to operate safely within the National Airspace System. You need to understand what you can do, what you can't do, and understand what other people are doing so that you can anticipate and just have a safe operation. So you can use that advisory circular to help understand a little bit more about how small unmanned aircraft fit in the National Airspace System. The next resource that the FAA publishes to help you prepare for the Part 107 written exam is the FAA Remote Pilot Small Unmanned Aircraft Systems Study Guide. It's called FAA-G-8082-22. So this is another document that the FAA provides you to learn a little bit more about what is expected of you on the Part 107 exam. It is essentially a study guide that you can use to make sure that you are covering all the materials that you need to cover in order to prepare for the exam. And then the last resource that I think is very important for you to study for preparing for the Part 107 written exam that the FAA offers is the Aeronautical Information Manual, or the AIM. You may see it in other places called the Airman's Information Manual. It was changed a little while ago, but you may see those different terms. They are the same thing. So the AIM is a document. It's another document that is essentially the lifeblood of any pilot. You need to know this document. You need to understand it. These are guidelines that the FAA has published for you as a pilot. And so you don't necessarily need to read the entire AIM and understand the entire AIM to pass the Part 107 exam. It is a good idea to have a good understanding of what is in there, though, because if you're immersing yourself in this world of the manned operations and the National Airspace System, it's important to understand just what other people are doing. But you, in order to study for the Part 107 written exam, in the AIM, you should study these different chapters. So Chapter 3 is on airspace. Chapter 4 is on air traffic control. Specifically, you want to study Section 1, services to all pilots. Section 2, radio communications, phraseology, and techniques. And Section 3, airport operations. You also want to study Chapter 5, which is in air traffic procedures. Then you'll want to review Chapter 7, safety of flight, specifically Section 1 on meteorology, Section 5 on potential flight hazards, Section 6, safety, accident, and hazard reports. You also want to study Chapter 8, which is medical facts for pilots, specifically Section 1, fitness for flight. And then Chapter 9, aeronautical charts and related publications, specifically Section 1, the different types of charts available. So these are all the different resources that are out there that are free for you to study to prepare for the Part 107 written exam. I have created a nice blog post where I have curated all this content for you. You can click on the link in the description box below to read the blog post. You can also download it as a PDF, and you can save it and print it off. And again, use it as another checklist to guide you as you're preparing for the FAA Part 107 written exam. And so thank you. If you like this video, please make sure you like and subscribe for more drone and drone education type YouTube videos. And I will see you guys in the next video. All right, so that was the episode. I certainly hope you enjoyed it. I can't wait for the next episode. I can't wait to grow this community. I would like to invite you to join my Educators Who Drone Facebook group. You can just go to educatorswhodrone.com, and that will bring you right to the page to get access to the Facebook community. If you are not an educator, you are welcome to join as well. We are talking about all sorts of different things related to drones in the Facebook group. We're small but growing, and I'm excited to have you there. So I will see you guys in the next episode. If you liked this episode, though, please make sure that you share it with somebody who you think might enjoy it. And if you know of somebody who might benefit from the use of the closed captions, please send them the YouTube video where they can participate in our podcast as well. See ya.